We are live.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, from whichever corner of the world you're joining in. Welcome to the Transition Dialogue. This is in collaboration, first in the series of dialogues that we have for Spectreco and Think Ahead. My name is Nurul, the moderator for today's webinar. It's a very pressing discussion that we're going to have, seeing the correlation between climate action, FDI, and economic growth, what it means for professionals, what it means for organizations, what it means for investors, looking at the impact. And we would be discussing how it means where are we driving the most important factor, which is FDI. There's a lot of talk around mitigation, adaptation. There is a lot of discussions in terms of what it means for economic growth for different countries. And the best part of today's webinar is that we're keeping it very practical. Those of you who are joining us on our LinkedIn pages, on our Facebook pages, just make sure that whatever questions you have, whatever queries you have as part of this live stream, just make sure that the comments and questions keep coming in. Joining me today, we have two very good speakers who are going to share their insights around, what research is being done. We will be looking at certain case studies as well. So let me introduce them one by one. So I am really pleased that I have Mr. Zarif Luddin, the head of institutional partnerships, joining us from ACCA. Zarif, hi, are you there?
Hi, Noor. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And we're joined by our partner, Spectreco, Sajid Aslam. He's also here. Hi, Sajid. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, thank you, Noor, and thank you, Zarif, for joining us today.
Wonderful. So, how we are going to shape today's webinar is that because we are live on different platforms, I will be looking at the stream as well, and we'll be getting certain questions and comments as well. But let's set the scene first. This is a correlated issue that we are speaking about. I'll be handing over to you, Sajid, first for a presentation on what it means correlating climate action, FDI, and economic growth. And then we'll be looking at Zarif's perspective in terms of what it means in terms of policy level discussions, what it means in terms of talent, what it means for capacity building that certain professionals have to look at, so that we can have a very concerted discussion. We're going to have the presentations for 15 minutes each, and then I'd like to allow for some questions that we can take and a question as well. All right, so over to you, Sajid, if we can have your presentation up.
Thank you. No, the other one.
All right. While we are getting the presentations, this is the presentation that's up. We'll be able to see Sajid also in a bit. Yes, over to you.
Thank you, Noor. So I think it's important to understand the climate action and what it's driving. And I think if we go with the Chinese proverb that every adversity is actually bringing certain kind of opportunity, and every change in the world, whether we talk about the industrial revolution or we talk about the revolutions before that, whether when we started with the different kind of tools, those things have created new opportunities. So climate change and a climate vulnerability right now as we speak is a very big risk to the existence of humanity. But it's not something which is a pessimistic scenario. There are actions which we can take, and definitely there are actions which can help us to drive the economic growth and also mitigate the risk which we are running at the moment. So the whole idea of this conversation is to build it in a way that we can understand what the climate risks are and how the money is going to flow in, and particularly in context of the climate finance, and how the economies can really take a benefit of that climate finance and rebuild their climate resilient infrastructure and the economies which are more sustainable and more inclusive as we speak. So starting with a little bit background of Spectreco. Spectreco is all about simplifying the sustainability journey for investor, businesses, and government. And whenever we talk about the sustainability journey, we talk about the compliance, we talk about the superior financial return and access to capital, but most importantly, intergenerational impact. So Something which we are facing today are the actions which were taken, let's say, in the last 150, 200 years, which has created an impact. Unfortunately, it's not a positive one, but that's what our role is now, just to create another intergenerational impact which is positive and leave that planet in a way that our generations to come can really leverage that. Spectreco has a presence in US, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific as we speak. We work across different industry. That's also visible on the slide there. So it's include the belt infrastructure, energy, transportation, agriculture, and finance side. And we provide services around the decarbonization, circularity, risk management, capacity building, and monetization of the good work any government or business is doing. And our always focus is to combine that human and artificial intelligence to really deliver on the core goals which we are talking about, the revenue growth or a cost reduction or access to capital, as we spoke earlier. And there's also a platform which help us to really track all that progress and create those insights and the dashboard which can help management and the governments and the stakeholder to really see the progress and the forecast, the future at the same time. So that's about the Spectreco. Let's start seeing that what are the recent climate events which we have witnessed in a very recent past. If we pick up from the last 2 years, there were massive floods we have seen in Pakistan, which have costed somewhere like close to 15 billion in economic losses, damages, and then almost 16 billion economic losses and the 16 billion in a reconstruction cost. So that's a very, very massive cost or risk which transpire in Pakistan due to one of the climate-induced event. Similarly, in very recently Dubai, we have seen a heavy rainfall, which was again an extreme form of weather, and that's created a challenge a little bit for a few days. But now they are back on the track and recovered. But those were the key challenges which we have seen. Similarly, if you look at ASEAN, there were 27 disasters in ASEAN within 2023, which include the flood, rainfall, drought, and then again the risk around the sinking city. All these things are happening because of the change in the weather or increase in the temperature which we are witnessing over the years now. And given where we are today, I think these risks are going to increase day by day if we are not going to take right action as we speak. And while we are talking about Pakistan, Middle East, and ASEAN, even the North America and the Europe, if you pick up the recent climate events, there is a massive damage which has been done. So if you look at the North America, we are talking about $603 billion worth damages. And if we are talking Europe, we are talking about the 380 billion one. And that clearly shows that nobody is safe unless until everybody start taking that corrective measures there. So regardless where we are, what we are doing, which industry, which role, which type of stakeholder we engage with, I think the climate-induced disasters are something which requires a one single focus and a collective action from everyone, whether we're talking about individual, we're talking about society, nations, country, regions. So everyone has to move in the same direction. And just if you look at the scenario analysis, and you can see a lot of, if we are moving from 1.5 degree increase versus 4 degree increase, you see a lot of major changes in terms of heat, in terms of moisture, and in terms of the dry and wet weathers. And these weather have got a significant implication for energy system, for agriculture systems, for our food security, and even from a healthcare perspective, it's going to change every single ecosystem which we are running right now. So this is, if you look at the global warming levels, and if that changes to from a 1.5 or it go beyond 1.5, so there are certain cities and the countries and the geographical region which may not survive. What does it take in terms of investment? And that's where we are talking about what's happening right now and how it might change. So if you look at by sector, we are seeing a massive investment increase. So if we compare it with the level of investment in 2015 to 2020, the factor you will see that it requires somewhere 2 to 7x time, or in some cases 20x time in terms of investment by sector. And if you look at from the economy perspective, even from a developing economy, that require a significant increase in terms of investment it will take to mitigate and create adaptation plans and execute them. Similarly, if you look at the developed country, although they are making certain investment, but still the level of investment required is a manifold if we compare what we are doing right on an annual basis, right? So just to give you the context that it's not going anywhere, and it will for till 2030 or 2050 rather, we will be looking a major flow of money to address that climate vulnerability across the globe. So it's not only one country, one region. We are talking about across different sectors, and we are talking about across different regions. In a COP28, and this is most of the findings which we are sharing here are coming from the COP28 stock take. So there is a certain recognition that whatever we are doing right now is not enough, and we need to do more. And then there is another recognition that the non-party stakeholder, that's been a non-government stakeholder, has to be engaged. Previously, the Paris Agreement significantly talked about the parties, which means the government. And now, if we see that there are things which are working and there are things which are not working. So that's after that stock take, that's quite an alarming situation in terms of the progress we are supposed to make versus the progress which we are making. There's a significant recognition of the climate finance reforms, that the money which it requires, which was in COP20, we were talking about somewhere like 46 trillion, and now that amount runs in hundreds of trillion, and that's and we at how much amount we need on an annual basis and for many years to really see where we are going as an additional investment. So there will be a certain concept that there is existing investments which are supposed to be there, but in the right direction, but there is additional investment which is required. Another recognition in a COP28 was the capacity building and the technical assistance, that a lot of conversation which is happening once we go for execution, the talent and the processes and the technology is not there to really expedite or simplify that kind of delivery or execution model. And then again, in a COP28, they set up a certain target for 2030. That's been a roadmap for 2025 to 2030, and which requires triple renewable energy capacity. So whatever we are doing today, we need to triple that one. And it has got its own implication that how much does it cost, and significant change in the energy system or energy ecosystem in totality going to impact the other industry, even for the appliances side, from the cable side, from grid, from transmission. Everything will have to be reviewed in that context. Another area which was again highlighted is a nature-based solution. So there is a recognition that we have to go back how it has designed the planet. So and we have to understand the capacity of the earth is not limited, and it's still like the quantity we are emitting versus the capacity to absorb that emission back in the earth as a natural process is quite significant. The difference right now is the velocity with which we are emitting the carbon, and the velocity which earth can absorb that carbon. And then with our deforestation and a lot of man-made scenarios in terms of the biodiversity and the change in the land usage, that has reduced that velocity further. So if we can increase that velocity and on the for the absorption or sequestration, and at the same time we decrease the emission, that will help us to balance that equation. So now let's look at that, why we are talking about FDI and a climate action. So based on many different estimates, right now there is a consensus that annually till 2050, we need somewhere $1.0 trillion to $3.5 trillion every year to really fund the climate mitigation and adaptation plans. And that's a significant money which has to flow in. The challenge is that how that money will flow in, who will attract that money, how that money will be deployed, how that money will reflect the transparency that whether the mitigation or adaptation plans are effective, whether that money is really creating that kind of impact which that money is supposed to. And that's where we will see a couple of case studies, and then definitely after this presentation we will go for a question answer session to explore it further. So if you look at the kingdom side, so kingdom has created Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they have got a mitigation focus and they have got adaptation focus. I'm just right now talking about the mitigation one. So it has got an energy efficiency, renewable energy. Interestingly, the carbon capture and utilization and storage, that's one of the area which they are using as for the mitigation action, and utilization of gas rather than the liquid fuel, and methane management. So I think these are the key mitigation focus. And for that, there are certain projects and initiative which Kingdom of Saudi has developed. So there is a Saudi Green Initiative, there is a circular carbon economy approach, the financial arrangement, the technology, and again capacity building and the carbon markets. I think these are the key initiatives which are very apt to really deliver on those mitigation, and even the adaptation co-benefit which comes through that mitigation are already there. And for that, how they are really channelizing the climate finance, and that's where I loved about the kingdom. They have upscale their PIF, so their sovereign fund, which is right now or a year back was standing somewhere around 700 billion. They are taking it to somewhere 3 trillion, and they are using that money and they are channelizing the foreign direct investment through that fund under a specific governance and the structures which are very focused on those areas which are aligned with their NDC, their National Mitigation and Adaptation Plan, and at the same time aligned with their economic growth initiative. So if you look at the Kingdom's Vision 2030, and we try to really drill it down in terms of the execution capability and the policy framework, so it's very well designed. We are sure there will be certain challenges during the way, but I think it's a time to be bold, to commit on something and start executing and learn and adapt while we are doing it. So it's not the time where we don't commit the bold targets here. So I think that's what we are seeing in Kingdom. And then another interesting part, they are using PIF and they are subset of the PIF to fund projects within Kingdom, as well as they are looking for international investment to mitigate any risk, particularly from a food security risk perspective and diversification perspective. They are also allocating 25 to 30% of the funds to go international. So that's a one model where we are seeing how the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is channelizing that climate action, raising that FDI, bringing it to Kingdom, as well as they are creating outbound investment plans. And there's an alignment between their national mitigation and adaptation plans, as well as their economic growth aspiration. Similarly, if you look at ASEAN, so ASEAN have taken a very different model. It's a combination of multiple countries. We are talking about 11 countries. They have created ASEAN Center for Climate Change. They are driving more engagement through the trade and investment agreement, and they have incorporated the climate action in every new trade and investment agreement, as well as they are revising and upgrading the existing trade agreements to include the climate action, particularly with the carbon border management adjustment mechanism coming from the Europe side. That's also something where they are making those adjustments. ASEAN is all about trade. It's all about the collaboration. Their key focus is the forestation and agriculture, energy, and transportation as one of a key area. And for that, they have created ASEAN taxonomy for sustainable finance. So they are using that mechanism. All 11 countries are trying to align the definition and going in a market with sustainable bonds using the stock markets for the commercial capital, as well as to the different funds like GCF and the GEF, where the definition and alignments are right. And right now they have already raised, by end of December 23, there is a $46 billion worth of green bonds or sustainable bonds are already in play as per the ASEAN standard of the sustainability finance and taxonomy. And that's not there. They are much more which are under the planning side of it, and they are enabling their stock market to raise that kind of commercial capital. And if we come to Pakistan and we look at how they are channelizing that particular FDI within Pakistan, so there's a massive project, the Green Pakistan, and we have to understand in Pakistan, the significant emissions are coming from the agriculture side rather than the energy side, as opposed to the most of the other regions. So Green Pakistan is one of our initiative to bring a new 1 million acre of land under cultivation and work on a sustainable farming and channelize that money here and use that good work which we are using to generate those carbon credits and trade those carbon credits as one of our additional ROI mechanism. And there's already proof of concept with the Delta Blue, where the mangroves were restored and the carbon credit coming out of that mangroves were listed on a voluntary market in Singapore. Another area which is important to understand from Pakistan, public-private partnership with the recent flood, and where they have to really bring people back and restore that infrastructure. There's a public-private partnership which is channelizing money, and they are building the 2.1 million new houses in Sindh. The last time that kind of project was done, I think in Thailand, with somewhere close to 900,000 houses. We are talking about 2.1 million houses which are being built, and there's a good progress as we speak today. And there are new materials which are being used. There's a more sustainable infrastructure. The people are asked to really plant a tree there, and there's a waste management system. There's a renewable energy system which with these 2.1 million houses are coming, and that's again one of a mechanism to channelize money internally and put it back in the system, where they are creating a more climate resilient housing in the flood risk areas. So these are the couple of case studies. And just going back in the market side, so I think there's a lot of new instrument which came into market to support the climate action. Carbon credits is one, renewable energy certificates, then the debt for nature swaps. These are also a massive mechanism or a financial instrument which are being used in a different part of the world. Then if you look at the investor challenge, so there's not enough green investments. And when we say green investment, that's mean anything for which they can substantiate using the data that all the KPIs and the metrics are being followed, and that can be substantiated and have auditable data based on a certain standards. So there are a lot of green labeling, but having that green asset is still a challenge. And with the new regulation, it's becoming more challenging to have that label without having a proper regulations around it. And we are seeing a carbon credit offtake. We are seeing the REC take off. So in a new economy with the cap and trade agreement regulations, so that's creating new markets for the countries who do not have enough quota to undertake the industrial activity. But this carbon offset is helping them to really continue with that, and also some good work which is happening on the other part of the world can be monetized, and that's also a given mechanism within the Article 6 of Paris Agreement. So just looking at the use cases, if we go with that, so the overall the framework, if we look at the conceptual one, it's a blended finance model which has to come into play. And when we talk about the blended finance, that's mean the money should be coming from the grant, concessional loan, and the commercial loan to put it together with the right kind of ROI, which can help us to really attract those investments and deliver on the climate action, but also deliver on the economic activity. Unless until there is an underlying economic activity, the climate action itself is not sustainable, which might require a little bit change in the regulation, which might require a lot of collaboration, that might require the joint investments in the region, like we are seeing in ASEAN in the mitigation and adaptation plans. And then the overall transparency in terms of the data flows and the reporting, that basically bring and help bring more investment in that space. Just the collaboration for the economic growth. Again, just closing it on the remarks, we have to engage private sector. That's an important one. The public partnership is the one of a success we are seeing in Saudi. It's the same thing which we are seeing in ASEAN. It's the same thing which we are seeing in Pakistan. So from a national mitigation and adaptation plan, there has to be a certain engagement with the private sector and the funds. Regulatory frameworks and the trade agreement should enable that kind of arrangements. Capacity building and the talent enhancement is one of a key area which has recognized COP28 as well as with the rest of the people that that's how it's going to take forward. And then standardize the deal flow, make it easy for people to invest in the certain projects. So deal flows are important one. It's a complicated scenario once we talk about the climate finance, but if we compare it and we standardize the deal flow, it make everybody's life easy. And then use the public private partnership on the focused industry. So plan, collaborate, and execute. And that's the model which can help to use climate action and the climate mitigation and adaptation plan to attract FDI and channelize that money in a right way for the economic growth side. So we will be taking more questions later. So over to you, Noor.
Thank you, Sajid. I think very well said. And let me just also try to summarize all of this for the benefit of the people who have been joining us late. I think you've rightly said, and just putting things into perspective in terms of a lot of the climate-induced disasters that are taking place, looking at how it's actually destructing the whole entire ecosystem, the velocity that you've spoken about, and a lot of the policy level discussions that are taking place at various different forums. And we do come across these facts and figures. When I was doing my research, the $1 trillion per year research till 2030, it's just right around the corner. But we're looking now at $3 trillion till 2050. I think some of the keywords that I really picked up, and I would want both you and Zarif to focus on later, is what are we doing in terms of transparency? The processes that need to be reinvented to the processes that need to be regenerated is also a debate that a lot of private sector organizations might be having. And in terms of the fact that you also mentioned, Shade, that public-private partnerships, what's a successful model? We have seen many successful models on climate financing, on the PPP taking place all across the globe. So I think it will be exciting discussion if we can also share some as part of this webinar as well. I think I'm gonna link it up with that last particular flow diagram that you had shared: plan, collaborate, and execute. The flow essentially is, as I see it, from a perspective of somebody who might not be practically doing it, but somebody who's going to be impacted by the climate finance a lot. The talent bit is also something that goes hand in hand. The discussions around the fact that there has to be a lot of development coming in from both the investors, coming in from the public sector, coming in from the implementers has to be there. But this discussion around talent is something that's absolutely key, because all that you're mentioning is stuff that requires a lot of capacity building. And this is where I want to pull Zarif in as well, because when we were planning the discussion, we actually wanted to really just see in a process flow that what are some of the talent capabilities that we are looking at, in terms of the professionals who are going to be a part of the climate finance, the FDI, and the economic growth evaluation. You spoke about a lot of reporting. Who's going to do all of that? And what are some of the ideal capabilities that we need? So, Zarif, I think over to you for this particular presentation, and we want to hear from you from ACCA's perspective in terms of what's been done and what should ideally be done in terms of when we're looking at talented individuals who are going to do all of this stuff for us.
Thank you very much, Noor, and thank you for summarizing the discussion that Sajid made and the opening remarks. I guess there are a lot of buzzwords that needs to be picked from Sajid's presentation, and each one of them really needs to be distilled down a lot in details that has a lot of value for all the relevant stakeholders engaged. And I'm already using the one which is the stakeholders. So I really like the flow of presentation, which is started off with looking first for the factors and what's happening, which does seem pretty scary at the beginning, but also then the good news is that everybody is very much enthusiastic, seriously taking at the country level, at the global level, in terms of mitigating and addressing the challenges we are facing today in the world. But one thing which is really making it attractive for me is the actors. Who are the actors or so-called stakeholders that needs to be brought into this discussion so that they can identify what their roles are, who plays what, and how this can be brought up into the discussion. And I really like the breakdown also with regards to the governments, because when you talk about the FDI, when you talk about the economic growth, so you also talk about the trust, right? And when it comes to the trust, the first important and most important stakeholder for any FDI or for any investor is the government, to ensure that the FDI is protected, secured, and it is basically meant for those purposes. Could I request colleagues to put up my slides, and can you please confirm if it is visible for everyone? Right, great. Thank you very much. So keeping earlier points you mentioned, so what I will do, I'll try to break it down a little bit with regards to setting the scene from the public sector perspective, but as well as bringing it into what the accountancy profession has done so far, what needs to be done, where we are now, and where we should be heading going ahead. So just to give you a little bit more, so it will not be possible to tackle the climate change without public funding. That's absolutely clear. And so whether we talk about the climate adaptation mitigation projects, such as, for example, hurricane resilient housing or flood-proof road infrastructure, is a high-risk investment for private sector due to the high probability of damage and loss. And these projects require a lot of funding, and the payback period may be too long for the private sector to get involved into. So the investment returns may be too low for the private sector, and these to find these projects attractive. Now, the climate action has to address all the sectors at the country level, and to be aligned with the nationally determined contributions, or the NDCs we call them, and the emission reduction plans. So one company or one sector cannot address the climate change on its own, and the fiscal policies need to address many sectors and support the achievement of the NDCs at the national level. Now, the public sector has the capacity for climate action at a larger scale, and also it has the tools to do it well. But how it can be done is that to look at the governments can channel the public spending into climate risk resilient infrastructure through government green investment, where the projects are appraised not just based on the economic but the sustainability merits. And government public procurement allows buying only from sustainable suppliers committed to reducing carbon emissions. And with the size of the public procurement, this can really make a difference on the supplier behavior. I'd say go green if you want to have a government contract. And the the green budgeting is an approach which is used by the governments to identify and prioritize the revenues and expenditure from and for the green sources. The example can be able to reduce revenue from fossil fuel subsidies and increase the spending on green infrastructure through the budget processes, and etc. And a final thought on this slide is that the fiscal policy needs to be climate smart, such as, for example, removing subsidies from the fossil fuel producers, introducing carbon taxes, not promoting it, but just mentioning, and channeling revenue to support households who are willing to install, for example, the solar panels or switch to other green energy sources. Moving on, what good PFM needs, and if we look at that, so public sector can have a huge impact on addressing climate change by means of the PFM, or the public financial management. But the PFM systems must be robust. So that is the precondition or the criteria, and adapted to this task, which is a huge one, and that needs a lot of focus on that. And the backbone of PFM systems are accountancy professionals. Obviously, economists play a big role in other professionals, but accountancy professionals do have a specific role to play, and they're very well placed to achieve the objectives of a well-managed public money. And as a global accountancy body, ACC has been looking into this, evaluating, and trying to figure out on how best the professional accountants can be positioned in the public sector, and how they will be able to support the decision-making mechanisms. So some of the examples I'm going to walk you through, for example, support the introduction and maintain program-based budgeting and green budgeting practices, which are needed to ensure climate-related projects are identified and well-funded. And then also the monitoring side of it, and the performances assist, as well as to ensure that the money is not being diverted to fossil fuel-related projects and etc. The professional accountants can help to build a medium-term budgeting framework, which is necessary to deal with the climate change, as climate is not a one-year issue. It's a long-term issue, and the real impact of which will be seen by generations. And I think the climate challenges we're facing today is not just an impact of last year or a few years. It has been as a result of so many decades that we have not been mindful of that. And the real impact, which can be seen by next few generations going ahead. The professional accountants can also help with the effective investment management, which is a key to climate action, as accountants are very well placed to identify opportunities for green projects, analyze related data, appraise projects, including the climate risks and opportunities involved, and cost them accordingly. Another example is asset management can be a more effective and bring an extra revenue for the government to fund other projects, but also understanding the assets are prone to climate risk and how to address these issues is a task that a public sector accountants can do absolutely better. So now we do talk about public sector and accountants. I think it's worth mentioning that one of the key areas that support green public finance spending is accrual accounting, as it allows governments to see what assets and liabilities it holds and obtain a longer term perspective of its spending, better control the decision making as a result. And accountants again can help the transition from the cash-based accounting to accrual-based accounting, which many countries have already committed. Some of the countries are already in the transition, and I think that will help them a lot in the decision making for climate-related actions. Accrual accounting also allows for more transparent reporting, together with accrual-based budgeting particularly, so the comparability of the planned and the actual expenditure becomes easier and gaps more evidence, and hence makes the right decision, is it possible to a greater extent. Then looking on the FDI and on the PPP opportunity side where it can be. So the only when there are good PFM systems in place, donors and development agencies and banks will be comfortable to lend the government with a larger amount needed for climate-related projects, because a good PFM system reduces fiduciary risks of the debt being mismanaged. The foreign direct investments, or the FDIs, will only be possible when there is a confidence that the PFM systems are effective, accounting and reporting is transparent, and there is a sufficient degree of oversight by the government that investments are secure. And this would ensure that the FDI is channeled to the climate-related projects, not elsewhere, as such examples I mentioned earlier. Moving on, now looking at the technical skills or capability aspects of that. Although I mentioned and that accountants are very well placed to support the PFM and hence plays a key role in attracting FDI and driving the economic growth, but obviously they still need to be built new skills and capabilities to do that. So to some extent, or to very much extent, we can say that accountants already have the skills needed to deal with a lot of aspects of PFM, such as the ability to analyze, interpret non-financial data, produce high-quality decision-making, useful information, or analyze a large amount of complex data, evaluate efficiency of the internal controls, and most importantly, doing some critical thinking, and etc. But also further enhancing these already sets the strong foundation through the continuous education and the professional development, which is needed to ensure that the accountants remain a key element in addressing the climate challenges in the best way possible. So now, to cover that up, I think what needs to be done, what the accountants need to focus is more around building the understanding of the new standards in sustainability reporting and assurance, understand the new data on climate risks, on climate metrics. And I think, Sajid, you did mention quite a number of times on different numbers and statistics. And I think while you were talking through your slides, I was thinking like, how as an accountant, I or someone else will be able to further analyze this and use it when we are going to be supporting the decision making when it comes to the climate related actions. And then the accountants also need to learn to be able to conduct the scenario planning and assessments in the context of the longer timeframes and high uncertainties. So, and the last but not the least on this point is to understand the ethical implications involved in sustainability and the impact of technology on their work, as sustainability definitely leverages technology to a much greater degree, and that may require more technical and specific knowledge in application. So, for example, how to use AI in specific carbon emission counting and etc. So I guess just long life learning is already a key requirement. And we sort of like established that understanding and the capability of the professional accountants. But a few more steps needs to be taken, right? Which is to top up the certifications and qualifications, specific sector knowledge and development, and building that context and being able to do the relevant analysis, a greater degree of knowledge exchange needs to be done, and etc. And bringing the discussion a little bit to what ACCA has been doing is, so for ACCA, a key way in which ACCA drives understanding and skills development related to sustainability in the broadest sense is through our global initiative called the Accounting for a Better World. So, and this initiative acts as a global signpost to enable not just our members and future members, but also employers and the profession at a larger scale to build the capacity. So in the year ahead, sustainability is once again one of the key spotlights, and we will be focusing more alongside the AI and talent. So again, we have a huge series of professional insights, learning and events planned for 2024 and 25, and to support the spotlight and also highlight the vital role of accountants are playing in tackling climate change and the transition to a more sustainable world. ACCA has a wide range of current learning resources and related to sustainability. And this is really just making the point that Sustainability Hub on the ACCA Global, which I would highly recommend if for our members and future members to access the Sustainability Hub to be able to enrich further their knowledge. But I think it's also accessible for other stakeholders, employers, so that they can build their knowledge. And not just our insights, but it also has our learning articles, events, and most importantly, the technical activities. So it's a really key resource for our members and stakeholders to tap on and be able to use the relevant information. So we haven't stopped only with the PI and engagements and the collaborations, but ACCA actually last year started embedding the sustainability related content in its qualification. So in multiple exams and relevant topics have already been introduced, and we're working very closely with the standard setters on sustainability reporting like ISSB and others. There's a specific focus on syllabus enriching, and there will be more as more standards come out on the audit and assurance side as well. So with that, I'll take a pause. Thank you very much. And let's go to the question and answer sessions.
Thank you so much, Zarif. I think for all of the people who are on the webinar, and I could say them mostly would be accountants who are looking at, okay, what's in it for me? Which is a very, very logical question to ask. I think let me just quickly wrap up the discussion, what you was discussing about, just having a good PFM strategy. What does it mean for the capacity side? What does it mean for, the pockets of investment that is there? How do we utilize those funds quite effectively? Um, I think one of my favorite areas that you discussed was around sustainability reporting, what it means for, the capacity building to uh, be top up with the standards that are out there. Do we know about the GRIs? Do we know about the SSAP? Do we know about the UNGC? All of these factors that are going to enable the work that organizations are doing in terms of profitability. It all boils down to the fact that how effectively the processes are being managed. So thank you so much for doing that, and I think very important and very good resources. I'm feeling excited. Had I been an accountant, but I still think that I should go ahead and do the sustainability finance course that's out there. It's a 20-hour course. Would love to learn more. I'm going to open this forum also for question and answers. So I'll request the team that if there are any questions that we are getting live also, if you can plug it in the chat, and then we will try to answer some as well. But I had a few questions for both of you now. Let's have an open discussion. We might run a little bit ahead time, maybe by 5 minutes, but that's okay. Um, Firstly, I think a lot has been done. Both of you have shared that there's a certain barometer that we need to look at. Now, the barometer is actually a combination, a mixture for both investors, as well as for public sector organizations, as well as for the third important partner, which is the private investors. So, Sujit, let me open this up for you. What does it mean? What is that ideal criteria, and what should be actually the first step that these three stakeholders should be looking at when it comes to working on climate action?
I think it start with a very fundamental and from a planning side. So we really need to understand what the focus area. We cannot solve all the problems. So let's again, I picked up that example earlier as well. And if agriculture is the key area in Pakistan for the highest emitter, we can't start with the transportation and energy. And in some other area like Indonesia, if you pick up, if the forestation or deforestation or degradations of the forest is a one of a key area, again, energy is not the starting point. But if you come to the Middle East, where the fossil fuel is a one of a key challenge, and their combustion and the carbon emission is a one of a key area. So that's the starting point. So I think bringing that focus and a very clear focus that which industry, which area we need to start with, and then coming up with the very bold commitments, because this thing is not going to go away unless until we really go bold, we go creative. Like again, Saudi started with the carbon capture as a one of a key thing, where the rest of the world is still working in that direction, but Saudi is using that, or the Middle East for that matter is using that as a one of a key component for many years now, and they have advanced in a certain area. So the cement industry in certain countries can learn from that, and they can pick up. Second part is make it easy for people to understand how they can get engaged. So if we are talking about governments or a private sector or a global funds, make it easy for them. Create those standard process which resonate with them. Create those engagements and communication which can bring them to the table, and create those deal flows which can help them to close it. Because closure is a wonderful thing. Last time I was in Philippines and having a conversation, uh, so people raise that one. The GCF is sitting with the money, and the uh, countries who are bringing their projects to GCF to fund it, they are not aligned with the NDCs. So we have a national mitigation and adaptation plans that need to have an alignment with the private sector, with the public sector, and that has to create a public-private partnership. Third area definitely comes, which Zarif also highlighted and you highlighted, it's the capability and the capacity of the organization and people who are coming together to execute the projects or initiatives. So that public-private partnership, so knowledgeable people, right kind of technology, simplified processes, the data, the reporting, all those things are required to build what Zarif touched upon a couple of times, is the trust. Investment is always a function of understanding where they are going to invest and trusting people and the mechanism and the process and the countries and the policy through which that investment will realize. And then the transparency in terms of the reporting, that how that ROI is being created, whether it's a social ROI or a financial ROI or environmental ROI, but how that ROI is being created. So it's not something which my words or somebody else's word. It has to be substantiated through the data, which is auditable. So that's an important element when we are talking about the flow of money.
Thank you, Sajid. Zarif, anything else that you would like to add to the list? I think let's look at it more from the public sector point of view. That what are some of the elements that we should be looking at?
Thanks, Noor. I think, yeah, Sajid almost mentioned about all the important aspects that needed to be. So, what I thought will be good to link it more also with the investors and the word that I already used is with regards to the trust, right? And normally that comes with the practical aspects of like how the ethical, social, and government responsibilities are being seen by these investors, right? For example, if we look into the environmental policies, the investors will be very much interested to see whether there are enough commitments with regards to sustainable and environmental sustainability through introduction of the new policies on pollution control, or resource management, renewable energy, and etc. If we look at it from the social responsibility perspective, how these they would be, I think, interested, whether that is at state level or a private sector or a PVP level, right? They how they interact with their employees, with their communities, societies as a large, etc. I think, and the last point that I would like to emphasize on would be on the governance practice side of it, right? The governance structure of the private sector PVP or the government, which is also related a little bit, what I mentioned on the PFM reform. I think that is also an important aspect that ensures the transparency, accountability, and particularly the ethical decision-making process.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just wrap it up. I think some very important questions. Maybe make bold commitments. I like the fact that we're also making bold commitments and making it easy, Sajid. So these are two things that I think is very very important. But in terms of auditable data and reporting, and what also you are saying, Zarif, about creating these governance structures that are absolutely key. And I think if I look at the value chain of the whole process, then at every level we are looking at a professional who's going to come in, who knows what they're doing, who sees the business profitability and growth side. It has to be a win-win. When so much money is going into investment, it has to be a win-win, Sajid. So a lot what I have picked up from both of your conversations is around sustainability and what it means for sustainable growth. And you're also, Zarif, you also spoke about that the commitment has to be beyond a year. So what are we looking at in terms of a good sustainable policy where we could have the economic policies? How do we align them with the NAP, Sajid, because you spoke about that? Is there something missing? Is there a recommendation perhaps that we can have?
Uh, I think we have seen that missing in many countries. I worked across Asia, Pac, Africa, and even Europe and the US side. If we are looking at uh, a lot of people are not even aware of that, and we are talking about the big businesses that those countries do have NDCs or a national mitigation and adaptation plan, and they do have a priorities around it. And because they are not aware of, they are not properly engaged. And we have to understand not every government or government department is trained to engage private sector. Even sometimes there is a language issue. So we are working with a one city in a North America, one of a government, sorry, a city government, and when they are going for to raise that green capital from a commercial side, the language they are using and the engagement they are trying to do at the moment are not aligned with the language and expectation of the private sector. So I think the first thing comes into that. This is a very highly, it's a highly engaged mechanism to first understand what are the climate action and vulnerability. That's a one side. And then when we look at that, how we engage each other, do we have a similar language? One is talking about the SDGs, other is talking about S1, S2, the third is talking about the GRI, and then there was a TCFD if we go a couple of years back. So there is a certain evolution which is happening. And to bringing everybody at a one place, That's require everybody understand and speak the same language. And the same language comes from the data side, number one. Number two, there's always a challenge when we are talking about the economic growth. Economic growth, if you look at the history, the countries who have attracted the FDI are the one who have a lower benchmark for the environmental regulations. So if you can allow countries or industries to pollute your geographical area or the locations, you will attract more FDI. That was the history. And now this process is reversing. If you are working on a more simplified regulation which can help that multinational or a large organization to demonstrate to their customers and investors that they care about the environment as well as community. We should not miss out on a community side. And they have robust governance processes, like Zarif mentioned, which can bring the data back to the right stakeholder to demonstrate that. So if you put these things together, then the national mitigation and adaptation plan has to be aligned with the inclusive economic growth plan, and that put together with the right kind of language and engagement with the private sector and let the private sector lead that one can help create that integration and alignment for the future, and particularly in a long term future. So,
Yeah.
long answer to your short question: alignment is a must,
Yeah.
language is a must, the social indicator has to be incorporated within that environment to have an inclusive growth. Governance process is important, and again comes back to the trust which can be built through that transparent data and reporting side of it. So that's always an important part when you are talking about or controlling about the flow of money and giving the investor the visibility where that money is being spent.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I think I've been a slightly experienced the changes in the languages, Sajid. And I know that, for an impact for something which has to be the money is there, right? But to get to that process where we say that, okay, this is the actual result of that money where we're investing into it. What does it mean? Zarif, I'm gonna put up another question to you, stemming from Sajid's question, which is around data and the fact that it has to be transparent. I know for both of you to put up a slide deck. By the way, there's some requests from the audience as well that, if we can share the slide decks with them. So that's a request to both of you that if we can have for the attendees, if we could have the slide deck, because the most important thing is that you went through a lot of research. There is very less research also that is being done in collating the data and putting it up there. So Zarif, just a little bit in terms of your perspective. I know that you shared some resources from ACC as well. We do have a professional insights, with updated research that comes every year. So do you agree on what Sajid is saying in terms of data, and what it means for organizations to have it in one place where these easy to access reports and research could be accessed? It does need a lot of effort, but over to you.
Thanks. I think that's probably the first time I better understand the meaning of the big data. Because sometimes, because we have spoken so many times about big data and data analytics, but unless you get into that position, you probably don't get that. No, absolutely, I totally agree with Sajid, and also earlier you made a point around the missing. I think there is a lot needs to be done, right? So adding just on to the points earlier Sajid mentioned, the capacity element, I think, is a big one which needs to be addressed. And the research that which we have done, for example, ACCA has done, and if you look at it more, it brings the role of professional accountants, the role of the accountancy bodies, and how they can play an active role when it comes to the sustainability related any disclosure information reporting, counting, and etc. But I think what is also needed to be done at a country level, when I look at myself as an individual and I want to position myself as which category of a stakeholder I am in, so I don't see myself as an individual being part of a dialogue. I know there are very high level discussions being carried out at the government level, and then there are also done, but from a stakeholder perspective, I think there is that stakeholder engagement needs to be done, and that will help us to identify more sources of data collection, and then also the data analysis where the professional accountants can come to play a big role, where the economists can come to play a big role, and where other sectors can come to play a big role. So just to summarize, I do agree on that element of the data collection, but also the data has to come from the relevant stakeholders, so that the analysis and the understanding and the interpretation of that also becomes easier, because we're also going again with Sajid's point on making the decision process easy, the discussion process easy for people. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and well said. And I think, Zarif, I'm going to pick up another thing, which, as people who might be some practitioners here as well, who are maybe, leading organizations that working on climate action, for them to also have that brainstorming of ideas, how important it is to know that, which direction to go in. So if you're finding an individualistic approach to it, so how do we move ahead and do that? So there are some questions coming in. I'm going to put up the first one to Zarif. There's some talk around a national sustainable development authority in ensuring national sustainability while simultaneously attracting and facilitating FDI. Do you think it's a very crucial thing that we should be focusing on? This question is coming in from Salman. I've plugged it in the chat.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Salman. I think for me, the important point is the conversation and the discussion and the analysis of where a country's status is. Sajid's examples of Saudi, UAE, Pakistan, ASEAN region, and other regions highlighted that different countries in different regions are exposed to different climate risks, right? So the mitigations and the action and the speed to that would also differ. So I guess the establishing an institution would be absolutely important, that the government takes and establishes one which leads the whole discussion on the sustainable approach. But I think it has to be really contextualized. I know that the climate change is a global issue, but some countries are very at emerging risks of that, and then there is need to be a lot quicker decisions made than comparison to others. But the country context is very important. And particularly when you talk about the FDI, there has to be also a bit of an analysis on what has been the history of FDI in that particular market or the country we are. What are the lessons learned? How can we improve, and how can we gain more the investors' trust? Because we're talking about the same country. So how can we improve the systems that it builds more trust so that we can address some of the challenges which we're facing today?
Absolutely. Sajid, do you think a national sustainable development authority or an international sustainable development authority?
I think the research has recently revealed that the authority and the regulations are not going to drive that. It's the investment and particularly when we are talking about in the next 6-7 years, there is an intergenerational wealth transfer which is happening. So practically the wealth which was created after the Second World War is going to the people who are more a Gen Z or millennials or Gen Alpha, who are very eco-conscious, right? So their decision in terms of the investment and the consumption are going to make a difference. If you look at the national authority or if you look at the regulation, the world has always got the environment impact assessment authorities for the industries there, right? So all those industries were there. And at the same time, we are still in a situation where that environment risk was we were unable to mitigate that or identify that, or we let it happen. So I think it's not the authority, and then the word authority and the compliance, I wouldn't take it as a key initiative. Definitely those are important one, but where we have seen people executing things with the right integrity and intent is when there is a right kind of economic benefit. So it's always the economics which drives the thing in the direction where it should go. The regulation and the authorities have to be there to facilitate, like Zarif said, they should be able to help navigate the complexities and make it simple, rather than creating that authority which become a bottleneck for most of the countries. And particularly we have seen more in the countries like developing countries in Africa and even in the Southeast Asia or South Asia, where these authorities, rather than an enabling institution, they become a bottleneck one. So I would be very, very careful when we talk about international or a national authority. I would drive it through the flow of money and creating that economic benefit which has to be very inclusive and environment focused, and channelize that 68 to 70 trillion intergenerational wealth which is being inherited, but which is going to be inherited in next 6 to 7 years. And then our consumption pattern and investment considerations has to be driven through those people who have got that conscious that how they should drive it. So, and with the economic benefit is the key word. It's not the authority, compliance, or regulation which will drive it. It will only help that and facilitate that. Otherwise people will find a way to circumvent those authorities and the regulation, and we have seen that happen many times in the past as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was going to echo what you're saying. That, an authority that's not enabling that actual real-time impact on ground, that's not going to, really make any difference. So I hope, Salman, I hope that answers your question. We have another question, and I think I'm going to take this with a little bit of, current context that's going on regarding, the green solar installments. There are now discussions around taxation as well. I think I'm going to twist the question a little bit and take it beyond Spectreco's advocacy, but advocacy on all ends in terms of what it means, that where we see a speed breaker for sustainable measures that being taking place. What can we do in terms of advocacy, Sajid?
I think the first advocacy is to look what happened in the past. Like if we again 150, 200 years, when we were taking action, we were not looking at the end of life scenario of any product or service. So this is not something new. So 15,000 years ago, there were wise men who mentioned that when we are going for deforestation or changing the use of land, it's going to have an implication on our ecological system, as well as will impact the quality of life and the healthcare and everything. So that is a known thing. And then we come to back to the 150 or 200 years back, and we see that how the industrialization started happening, and we did not consider the nature as one of a key element. Similarly, we don't want to make that mistake again and going for a renewable energy or a new bold areas without understanding the end of life scenario, or create that flexibility to move in and move out from that particular commitment or the interventions when it's required. So we have to understand that. And I'll give you one scenario. Germany is right now 60% on renewable energy as we speak today, right? The generation of the renewable energy is 0.6 euro or 0.06 euro, which is very, very attractive. But the distribution and the storage, that costs somewhere right 0.19 to 0.28 euro. So the total cost of the energy for the customer or industry is way higher than the fossil fuel. Let's put it that way, right? So let's park it that way. So if industrial production based on a renewable energy is not viable, so they have to create a mix which comes from either the gas, which through the crisis it's not happening, and Germany is going back to the coal led energy plant, because the access to gas is right now a little restricted. So it doesn't mean they are going in a wrong direction. They have taken the right steps. They are moving in the right direction. It's just the timing difference which will happen. Similarly, like in a country like in Pakistan, there was a lot of conversation happening because there are 10 million houses which have got the solar. So, and then the country has got a IPP where the fixed payment has to be made. On April 24th, Europe has indicated to get out of Energy Charter Treaty. And that treaty is basically created internationally to protect the investment in the energy sector. And many times when the Europe was going for the renewable energy, those people and the companies have sued the government that there is a treaty which has got a certain protection. And now European Union has indicated, and the rest of the countries have to validate that, and they have to go through the law and all that. But Energy Charter Treaty is going to be revoked, which will open up a scenario where the investment in the existing energy system is no more protected, and the people going for the renewable one, they will have an equal ground. So similarly, the countries like Pakistan, they have to open up and create a market which is, number one, viable, feasible, and then there has to be a mechanism where the one sector or a one contract cannot really keep a country in a situation of extortion where the rest of the players can't play, cannot have a level playing field. So access to energy and affordable energy is now becoming one of a basic right. It's not something, it's not a privilege anymore, because the entire life is dependent on that. Whether we talk about education system, we talk about technology, we talk about financial system, healthcare system, there is a significant role which energy has to play in that. And if that energy is not accessible and affordable, that means citizens of that countries will suffer one way or other, and economic growth is definitely going to suffer for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So thank you, Sajid. I hope this answers the question for Hamza, who was asking us this particular question. So thank you so much. I'm gonna put up the final question now to Zarif. Any final thoughts? Apologies, we've run a little bit ahead of time, 10 minutes, but the level of discussions and the questions that we were getting also from the attendees have been really, really good. So, Zarif, anything in the future? I think if you were to give top three tips for the future for climate action and FDI, what would be your three key tips that you would like to give?
Thanks, and I hope that those three tips would resolve this big issue, right? But let's see. I think I'll go with the last questions a bit related to that. The first and most important thing, I think, for us, the advocacy, and the preconditions for advocacy is education and awareness. And from my perspective, I would only be able to advocate for something when I know what am I advocating for. So I think the advocacy element is very important. Secondly, who is advocating? It's not only an individual or an individual institution or ACCA on its own, or Spectreco could do it as two institutions, but actually there has to be a multi-stakeholder engagement. It's a very matrix and complex situation. So we have to analyze all the relevant stakeholders and then bring the advocacy and the education side of it. The other, I think, aspect of that I would recommend is that more engagement with the government at the end of the day, because ultimately it's the government who is accountable for running the countries, who's accountable for building the trust for the nation, and it's the government who will be able to put out there the statements which can build the trust for the FDIs, for the economic growth, and etc. So to me, government, stakeholders, and education will be the top three recommendations I would give. Thank you.
Thank you, Zarif. Very well said. Sajid?
I think I'll start with the bold commitment, building that capacity, and then, because end of the day it will come down to the matter of investment and money. So the deal flow, how quickly we can put together a deal flow which is understandable, which is transparent, and where we can engage all the stakeholder to really deliver on those bold commitments with the flexibility that we will adapt that based on our learning. So we have to start with the 60-70% of clarity, and we will navigate that ambiguity once we start doing it. We cannot really predict that outcome with 100% assurance as we speak, but the important part is to start that journey and take a first step, and let collaborate with all the stakeholder, including that advocacy, the capacity building side of it. But end of the day, make it simple and straightforward in terms of the deal flow, that where we are investing, what kind of outcomes we are looking for, and create that data set whether we are getting there or not. And it has to be a combination of the development sector money, it has to be a combination of the commercial money, and there has to be a right kind of financial instrument which can help everybody to use it and fund that kind of project, and then create financial return, social return, and the environmental return at the same time.
Wonderful. And I think I've already found the topic for the next transition dialogue, which should be perhaps on, the tools that are available, what financial instruments can we use to actually assess the reporting side of it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of this very first transition dialogue. I think it has been very, very useful for all of our audience. We are getting some feedback, but we would like to have more feedback coming in from the audience in terms of how you felt, how useful you found. If there are any more follow-through questions that you have, please feel free to reach out to both the gentlemen and their bodies that they're representing. There's lots of resources that are being shared For those of you who think that, there's not enough research or maybe we don't have enough case studies to share, there is lots that you can read up on both the organizations and their websites. Also, do connect up on the LinkedIn pages as well. We hope and aim that this would be a regular feature now with the Transition Dialogues. So thank you so much, Zarif and Sajid, for doing this. Also to our back support team who have been helping us with the webinar. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me. Thank you.
Bye bye.